Over the last decade, we've had to fight against an incredibly entrenched narrative on immigration, on mass immigration here in Europe, and not just with the crime wave, or crime waves maybe I should say, brought in by mass immigration, but a general, relatively persistent, although always minority, worldview around migration. To such an extent, and again the battle is still ongoing, we still haven't won, although we've made some progress over the last 2 or 3 years. But the feeling all of the time when we would lobby parliaments or policymakers or whatnot, it always seemed that there is some external power, and by external I mean non-regime, non-resident power, that seems to be fueling this incredibly pro-migration type of worldview, because it's, at this point it's a worldview, it's not just a narrative. And a lot of us, although not necessarily myself, did suspect Russia on it. And maybe Russia was involved as well. I'm not saying that it was China, but I am saying that I have a little bit of an evidence that China really loves the standard mainstream left-wing view on migration into Europe. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the propaganda basement. Yes, so migration, China Daily, Global Weekly, June 23rd to 29th, 2023. Again, let's note the Maoist style artwork about it. But until we get to migration, let's look a little bit here. So youth urged to help build a strong nation. That's very Ceausescu vibes. New policy measures to support recovery. I thought China doesn't have any problems, so why do you need policy measures to support recovery? Oops. And this is a headline that I really love because it's one more piece of evidence in the huge pile already whenever I say that there is a such thing as a German problem at a geopolitical level in Europe. And that German problem extends to the coughing in Cyrillic, and there you go, ideograms as well in the German political establishment. We'll see, maybe things change by the time I publish this video. I hope it doesn't fall right in the middle of the electoral season in Germany. Trust me on this, I wasn't intending necessarily. I mean, I do want to influence the German elections, just not by this video. But besides that, we should note just how, oh, there you go, President stresses people-to-people ties in meeting with Bill Gates and lauds tycoon's charitable arm. It's almost as if everyone claiming that Bill Gates is, well, coughing in Cyrillic and his involvement with the COVID-19 pandemic project is probably a bit too much, and maybe we should be looking into it. It's almost as if those people kind of had a point. I don't know, we were writing about this on the Freedom Alternative since 2020. Now there you go, so now we're reading from China Daily. So no, not a conspiracist blog by some Putinist in Europe, but, you know, the CCP's official propaganda newspaper. But hey, what do I know? But besides that, let's note how much space is dedicated to the US, right? Xi urges stable Sino-US ties. Time for US to build on goodwill. You don't do this, you don't write this if you think you're negotiating from a position of strength. I'm just saying. Nations global in whatever. Cross-strait, celebrating a cherished tradition. A lot of time, a lot of space given. There you go. US Army biological projects fuel worry. That sounds very similar to... Oh yeah, no, they do quote Russia. So yeah, they're just reprinting Russia's conspiracy theories. Okay, fair enough. So, World Refugee Day highlights deep crisis, collective response lacking in Europe, which is divided over migrant issue amid rise of right-wing populism. If I just show you this frame and cut away the part where it says China Daily here, this could be a headline in the New York Times, a former newspaper, which, by the way, also takes CCP money. I got a lot of CCP money. The reason for that is because the CCP has been bankrolling a lot of standard left-wing propaganda on migration, quote-unquote refugees, and so on and so forth. And you will notice that the same pro-refugee people suddenly had a slightly different discourse when it came to refugees from Ukraine. And some of them even went as far as to say, yeah, because it's different because the refugees from Ukraine are white. Gee, I wonder why so many people think that there is a white anti-white agenda. Well, I don't know. By Julian Shea, that would be CCP shill from London. As the full horror of the latest migrant boat sinking in the Mediterranean becomes ever clearer, with at least 81 people dead and hundreds missing, the timing of World Refugee Day on June the 20th, devoted to honoring the plight of people forced from their homes by conflict and persecution, could hardly be more grimly apt. The vessel sank in international waters off the coast of southwestern Greece, and with many unconfirmed reports about its capacity circulating, the full toll may never be known. Once again, the problems of the world are washing up on Europe's shores, and the range of reactions has included shock, outrage, and political anger. Mass population movements within Europe are nothing new. London's Imperial War Museum estimates that 65 million people were forced from their homes during World War II, and the United Nations Refugee Agency says as many as 4 million people became refugees as a result of the war in former Yugoslavia in the early 1990s. The human fallout of the Russia-Ukraine conflict is continuing, but it is the external nature of this mass movement that is different. Notice that it's only very exact figures and very long introduction, but the discussion about the Russian problem is just one line and then just moves back to bashing Europe. Again, this is intentional. This is not by accident. And while I do expect to read crap like this in China daily, the problem is that this article just really sounds like an article from the so-called mainstream media. Not really mainstream anymore, but that's a separate story for another day. Years after the Syrian civil war began, its shockwaves are still felt way beyond its borders. Adding to this, the UN report in March said 100,000 new refugees from Somalia had arrived in Ethiopia in the previous month, and the recent figures identified the Sudan civil war as a major contributor to a record 110 million people being displaced worldwide by the end of last year. It's clear that it's an issue unlike anything Europe has seen before, and different countries are reacting in different ways. Even before the latest tragedy, figures from the International Organization for Migration showed that between January and March, at least 441 people drowned while crossing the Mediterranean, making it the deadliest 3-month period since 2017. Total arrivals in Europe stood at 74,593 this year as of June 18th, with 72,951 sea arrivals as per the United Nations High Commissioner, whatever. The two countries of the geographic frontline are dealing with huge numbers trying to enter Europe are Italy and Greece. Both had the elections in the past 12 months, and perhaps not coincidentally, both saw right-wingers triumph. Kyriakos Mitsotakis and his Conservative Party in Greece, and in Italy, Giorgia Meloni of the Brothers of Italy, who became the country's first female prime minister, which is, of course, something that the Chinese really care about, and its most right-wing leader in many years. Barbara Serra, Italian and British journalist, said immigration had been a factor in Meloni's rise to power, but now she faces the challenge of how to deal with it. It's one thing to complain about a system that doesn't work when you're in opposition, but it's another thing altogether when you're in government, so she has to solve it. You can shrug it off. The challenge for her is that she now has to make it work. For many refugees, it is Europe that it is desired destination rather than Italy or Greece. Last time I checked, Italy is also in Europe, and so is Greece. I mean, they have been in Europe for a lot longer than Sudan has been a country, I'm just saying. Which just happened to be the nearest access point, Sarah said, adding that the absence so far of a coordinated European response is a major problem. The issue has been going on for a long time, but at the heart of it comes down to geography. Meloni will say that there's been a big split between the countries of Northern and Southern Europe over the issue, and the European Union has left us to our own devices, so we need to protect our own borders because those people are coming. Not to Italy, but many of them end up staying here. It's fair to say migration has been used as a political football. She exploited it, but there is an issue that is still unsolved. It's much more complicated than just saying immigration is bad. What helped her into power more than migration was COVID, as she was the only opposition when that was going on. Pablo Svelberg Gonzalez, professor of at the IE School of Economics, Politics and Global Affairs in Madrid. So notice that they quote all sorts of very weird and marginal figures. I mean, the IE School of Economics and Global Affairs in Madrid, I don't think I ever saw this institution ever quoted outside of CCP propaganda. Same thing here, right? Barbara Serra, an Italian and British journalist. Who the hell is this lady? Can we get a picture of her? Do we get anything about her that should make her notable for a global publication? No, of course not. And I'm pretty sure that if you look it up, you're not going to like it. Migration flows affect all EU countries to varying degrees, and they therefore require a collective response, he said. Acting separately may push migrants into more dangerous routes and circumstances, including smugglers who are associated with serious human rights violations and deaths. The initial agreements that laid the foundation for the EU were based on binding neighbors together so that they could never go to war again or witness endless lines of wandering refugees as seen in World War II. But while this has not been repeated internally, the current challenges of the incoming crisis have expressed deep differences among member states, not only of economic ability to absorb the costs, but also attitude towards outsiders and integration. Hungary's prime minister has long gone against the flow of migration and remains staunchly opposed to wider European initiatives to share the load. His country's population is in long-term decline, but with less than 2% of its population born outside of Hungary, he has no interest in bolstering those numbers with outsiders. He told state television that immigration must be stopped. That's the Hungarian stance. Hungary will not become a target destination for immigrants. We will not allow it, at least as long as I'm prime minister and as long as this government is in power. His fourth electoral success in April suggests many Hungarians agree. Earlier this month, the European Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ylva Johansson, secured majority support for a proposal to build a coordinated migration policy among EU member states. The only objectors were Poland and Hungary. By the way, this won't work anyway. Poland has accepted 1.6 million Ukrainians, but when it comes to other countries, its attitude is very different. Forced relocation does not solve the problem of migration, but it violates the sovereignty of the member states, Mateusz Morawiecki tweeted, Prime Minister of Poland at the time. Orban's spokesperson referred to impose the relocation, something not foreseen in the proposal, and said that this is unacceptable. They want to forcefully turn Hungary into a migrant country. Spain's far-right Vox party also weaponized immigration in recent local elections, with the vice president speaking that the policy of open borders imposed by the elites, which has imported violence and insecurity, destroying the identity of our neighborhoods, and demonstrating that multicultural societies are multi-conflictive, and people being forced to coexist in their neighborhoods with cultures that are incompatible with ours. Although what became a World Refugee Day was established in 1951, up until December 2000, it was known as Africa Refugee Day. More than 2 decades later, a quick look at headlines around the world will confirm that the remains as correct and as depressingly relevant as ever. So you'll notice that although it's a huge article, it covers an entire page, nothing is said about the responsibility of left-wing governments. It's all a problem of the right-wing populists. I mean, at least it does acknowledge that the right-wing populists do have a point, but everything else is just a chastising of societies and politicians who dare to take the position that, no, actually we don't want the whole world to move here. We just don't want that. How is that a problem? The whole article is written in a tone that you would expect in the New York Times or on the Washington Post, especially prior to the 2024 election, or the Guardian for that matter, and quite a few other places. That's the kind of tone that is being used. So no, I don't know the answer, but I'm increasingly convinced that a lot of the opposition to the basic bitch idea of, by the way, we should have borders, does come as a result of a lot of Chinese dollars, actually, because they don't pay in yuan. Their foreign shills are paid in US dollars, of course. As a result of a lot of Chinese money being poured into these marginal organizations, marginal personalities, marginal politicians, to just continue to keep the borders open. And you will notice that the implied solution in this article and is exactly the same as the one tried really hard and always failed by the Европейский Союз, which is oh, but let's have a EU-wide migration policy. Well, there's just one problem. We don't want that. We just don't want that at all. And this has been confirmed. I mean, you know, in Poland, Donald Tusk and Platforma Obywatelska, whatever, the liberals, defeated the Law and Justice Party of Mateusz Morawiecki, who is quoted in this article when he was prime minister at the time, by arguing that Law and Justice was not harsh enough on migration. There was a huge visa scandal and migration scandal that eventually turned enough votes into liberal votes, and that's how Donald Tusk is now in power. So, you know, it's not that a change in the political leadership will change things too much. The TISA party in Hungary, which is now the opposition's most hopeful to finally defeat Viktor Orban in elections, that guy is also coming from Fidesz circles and has a very similar view on migration. Recently, or at least recently from my perspective when I'm taping this, the Romanian elections took place. In fact, I'm taping this before the presidential elections, so I have no idea who the next president of Romania is, but I do have an idea who the next parliament will be. And the pro-migration party is absolutely marginal, whereas the political parties who had very little opinions about migration in the past, now they're explicitly anti-migration and generally anti-progressive ideology. So, you know, okay, Bulgaria has elections every other week, so maybe that doesn't matter. But the thing is that you will never get consensus. And it seems that even this push, but let's try to at least, let's keep on trying to get a EU-wide consensus. Maybe no. And it seems that that push is also kind of coughing in ideograms. Because why? If there is a EU-wide consensus on migration, that means EU-wide identical visa policies, which means ways for various, dare I say, foreign agents to get to establish themselves here and then move around undetected, like it was the case with Cyprus, which was straight up selling citizenships, EU citizenships, to Russian oligarchs, or in the case of China, right, you get Chinese spies getting into Germany, where it's the easiest, and then they can infiltrate further to the east, where we tend to be a bit more skeptical about this, except Hungary. Fidesz, KNDP are very big friends of the CCP, much to their detriment, and probably it will cost them power. But again, who am I to say otherwise? At the end of the day, it's their country. And this is the problem. I mean, this whole mentality that, oh, let's just have it at EU level is an abdication of the mentality that I just mentioned a few seconds ago, right? The standard mentality is, well, it's their country. I mean, you know, they're sovereign. They can do whatever the hell they want for their interests. And you know, if they think this is a good idea, then whatever. Whereas the EU standard mentality, again, mostly sponsored by the CCP at this point, is no, who cares if it's there? No, everyone should have the same liberal policy on migration because potato. Now, in this case, they make in the headline, oh, but you know, the poor refugees, but then somewhere around here, oh, but you know, Hungary's population is declining. So what? Oh, the line doesn't go up. So what? Seriously, so what? We still do get a choice. And if the line doesn't go up, maybe that's a price worth paying, rather than have the line going up, but have Budapest turn into Malmö or Londonistan or other places, I don't know, Calais or Lyon or, oh goodness me, Marseille. So yeah, I'm just saying. Anyway, New anti-China bill fuels concern. Again, notice just how much space is given to the United States. And the China Daily is primarily about the United States and then also about Europe. Very little about China. There are a few things that are more China-centric. But generally, if you get the China Daily to read about China, you may end up reading quite a lot about the US. Again, I can't entirely be upset by it, because otherwise, if it had been China-centric, then probably I wouldn't be making this series about what they write. Here's some more de-dollarization propaganda. Anti-dollar drive gains momentum. Weaponization of US currency, Fed's tightening policy causes hardship for many economies. Now, many economies should actually read the CCP. It causes hardship to the CCP. But the CCP can afford to write this, and then both the useful idiots and the intentional CCP shills take it as gospel, essentially, and retweeted, rebroadcasted later on. The reason they can afford to do this is because there's so many zombie companies and zombie businesses and zombie activities in the West that, quite frankly, should not exist, and they exist solely because of low interest rates or zero interest rate policies. And the reason this is the case is precisely the line goes up mentality. And this is the reason why this kind of propaganda works, because too many economic interests, not just in China but also in the West, have become hooked on this drug, which is zero interest rate policy, that now you have too many people whose income, quite frankly, depends on this wrong policy of discouraging savings and encouraging debt. So, of course, the treatment for that, which is high interests, is not going to be popular, which is why neither the Democrats did it and neither will the Trump administration. This insanity will continue. But let us hope that at least for the I don't want to say for the wrong reasons, but generally I do support good policy for the wrong reasons. In this case, it's not entirely the wrong reasons. I mean, an anti-China policy is generally a good idea, because screw the commies. But let's hope that at least from an impetus of screw the commies, we'll have more positive type of policy in the West, which is to increase the interest rate and keep it high for as long as possible. Yes, that will harm some of the local grifters in the US and Europe, but to be fair, those people deserve it as well. And on the long term, it makes everyone else better off, especially the more responsible people who save up and don't waste capital on frivolous things like, I don't know, PhD in intersectional olfactology or things of that nature. So yeah, that will be pretty much it for the weekly pill of Chinese propaganda on this season of the Propaganda Basement. Thank you for watching, and if you like this kind of content, consider supporting us with a donation, and don't forget to subscribe. And with all of that being said, thank you all for watching. I'll see you all soon. Cheers.